Commander Vexhai floated in the center of his ship's command chamber, his body glowing with soft blue light that pulsed in rhythm with his calm heartbeat. Around him, 12 other Zephyrians worked at their stations, their bioluminescent patterns, creating a gentle light show across the organic walls of their vessel. The ship itself was alive, grown rather than built, its hull breathing slowly as it filtered cosmic radiation and converted starlight into usable energy. They had been patrolling this sector of space for 3 cycles now, mapping star systems and cataloging planets for the Galactic Harmony Council. It was peaceful work, the kind that suited the Zephyrian nature. For over 3,000 years, his people had served as explorers and mediators, helping younger species find their place among the stars without conflict or violence. Vex quote, as species had evolved beyond the need for individual names in the way other races used them. He was simply the one who commanded, just as the others were the ones who navigated, who communicated, who maintained their living ships. They shared thoughts and emotions through biochemical signals, making decisions as a group rather than following a single leader's will. The 4th planet in this system interested them. Their sensors showed it had once supported life, though now it appeared barren. Several moons orbited the world, and asteroid fields suggested the system had suffered some catastrophe long ago. Still, there might be useful minerals or, perhaps, ruins worth studying. Navigator Kesseth rippled with colors of mild concern. Her patterns painted themselves across her translucent skin as she studied her instruments. Something was wrong with the readings near the largest moon. Their biosensors were picking up an object that should not exist. "Commander," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that conveyed uncertainty and curiosity. "There is a structure in orbit around the 4th moon. It appears to be artificial, but it does not match any known design in our databases." Vexhai drifted closer to the main viewing area, where a holographic display showed their surroundings. The object appeared as a red dot among the blue markers indicating natural celestial bodies. As they approached, more details became clear through their sensors. The thing was massive, easily 3 times the length of their exploration vessel. Its shape was angular and harsh, all straight lines and sharp edges that seemed to cut through space itself. The hull appeared to be made of processed metals, which puzzled the Zephyrians. Why would anyone build something so rigid when living materials could adapt and self-repair? "It appears to be damaged," reported Scanner Nixall, his patterns showing scientific fascination mixed with concern. "I detect multiple breaches in the outer hull, and energy readings suggest emergency repairs have been made. However, the main power systems are still functioning at minimal levels." What disturbed Vexhai most were the life signs. His people's biological sensors were incredibly sensitive, able to detect the faintest traces of living creatures across vast distances. The readings from inside the strange vessel made no sense at all. The beings inside appeared to be mostly water, held together by what seemed to be calcium-based internal structures. They moved through the ship using some form of atmospheric pressure system, requiring a specific mixture of gases to survive. Most shocking of all, they appeared to exist as completely separate individuals, with no biological connection between them. How can they coordinate their actions without a shared nervous system? Wondered Tekra, the ship's primary communicator. Her bioluminescent patches flickered with confusion. Each creature appears to be isolated within its own body. They must suffer terribly from the loneliness. Vexhai considered their options. The universal laws of the Galactic Harmony Council required them to offer assistance to any species in distress. The damaged condition of the vessel suggested its inhabitants might need help. However, the Council also emphasized caution when encountering unknown species, especially those whose biology was so radically different from anything in their databases. "Maintain distance for now," he decided, his pattern language conveying calm authority. "Attempt to establish communication. Use the standard mathematical progression to show we are intelligent beings seeking peaceful contact." Tekra began broadcasting, a series of prime numbers followed by simple mathematical relationships that any spacefaring species should recognize. The response came almost immediately, but it was unlike anything they had ever encountered. The alien vessel's exterior suddenly blazed with light. Rows of illumination panels activated in sequence along its hull, creating patterns that seemed designed to be seen from a great distance. More concerning, their sensors detected multiple weapon systems powering up throughout the ship. Energy. Readings spiked as the vessel's main reactors came online. Then the transmission arrived, cutting through their communication systems with surprising ease. The voice that spoke was processed through their universal translator, but even the machine had difficulty with some of the concepts being expressed. Unknown vessels, you have entered the patrol zone of the UES Thunderbolt. Identify yourselves, and state your intentions or we will consider you hostile. The words themselves were clear enough, but the tone behind them carried something the Zephyrians had never encountered in thousands of years of first contact situations. There was wariness, yes, and suspicion, but also something else. The beings inside that damaged ship were ready to fight. Not just defend themselves, but actively attack if they perceived a threat. Vex S patterns shifted to show deep concern. In all his species' recorded history, they had never met a race that responded to first contact with barely controlled aggression. Even the most primitive species they had encountered showed curiosity or fear, not this strange combination of caution and readiness for violence. They speak of patrol zones and hostile intentions, Tekra reported, her own patterns showing confusion. Commander, I believe we have encountered a warrior species. The concept was almost incomprehensible to the Zephyrians. They had learned of such things in their ancient histories, from the time before their species had evolved beyond individual competition and violence. But to encounter beings who still lived that way, who had reached the stars while maintaining such primitive social structures, was deeply disturbing. Respond with standard peaceful greeting protocols, Vexhai commanded, though his own patterns now showed the deep blue of serious concern. Tell them we are explorers seeking knowledge and friendship. Perhaps they can be taught better ways. Get. Tekra prepared their response. Vexhai found himself wondering what could have shaped a species to remain so aggressive even after achieving spaceflight. What kind of world must they have come from? What dangers had they faced that made them greet strangers with threats rather than wonder? He was about to discover that some species learned to reach for the stars not in spite of their violent nature, but because of it. Captain Jake Morrison rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the tactical display in front of him. The bridge of the UES Thunderbolt hummed with quiet activity as his crew ran through their standard procedures. After 8 months on patrol in the outer systems, everyone was running on coffee, determination, and the kind of exhaustion that came from too many battles with too little rest between them. The Thunderbolt had seen better days. Scorch marks from plasma weapons decorated her hull, and several sections still showed the emergency patches where synthesis railgun rounds had punched through the armor. Half the crew was taking medication to help them stay alert, and their ammunition stores were down to 40% of normal capacity. They were supposed to be heading home for repairs and resupply, but the war with the machines had left Earth's fleet stretched thin across dozens of systems. Captain, we have 4 unknown contacts approaching our position, reported Lieutenant Commander Lisa Hayes from the tactical station. Her fingers danced across the holographic controls as she refined the sensor readings. Range is about 2 million kilometers and closing slowly. Sir, these aren't synthesis ships. Morrison felt his pulse quicken. The synthesis machines had been humanity's only known enemy in space for the past 3 years. Their artificial intelligences viewed biological life as inefficient and sought to eliminate it wherever they found it. But these new contacts were something entirely different. What do you make of them, Hayes? Morrison asked, leaning forward in his command chair. Honestly, sir, I have no idea what I'm looking at, Hayes replied, her voice showing the professional calm that came from years of military service. The hull composition appears to be some kind of organic material. Energy signatures suggest controlled fusion, but the power output is way lower than anything we've seen. And sir, the shapes are completely unlike anything in our databases. Chief, Engineer Danny Rodriguez looked up from his station near the back of the bridge. His uniform was stained with coolant and his hands showed fresh burns from working on the damaged plasma conduits. Captain, those ships are giving off biological signatures. My instruments keep insisting they're alive, but that's impossible, right? Morrison exchanged glances with his executive officer, Commander Pete Sullivan. Both men had been fighting the synthesis for 2 years, ever since the machines had launched their surprise attack on Earth's outer colonies. They had learned to trust their instincts in combat, and right now those instincts were telling them to be very careful. Red alert, Morrison ordered. All hands to battle stations. Hayes, bring weapons online but do not target the unknown vessels. Rodriguez, I want maximum power to shields and engines. If these things are hostile, I want to be ready. The bridge lighting shifted to the familiar red glow of combat status. Throughout the ship, 2,400 crew members moved to their assigned positions, with the smooth efficiency of a military unit that had seen too much action. Gun crews loaded the main batteries, fighter pilots ran to their launch bays, and damage control teams prepared for possible hull breaches. Morrison activated the ship's main communication array. When dealing with unknown contacts, standard procedure was to establish peaceful intentions while maintaining the ability to defend the ship if necessary. Humanity had learned the hard way that not everyone in the universe was friendly. Unknown vessels, you have entered the patrol zone of the UES. Thunderbolt, identify yourselves and state your intentions, or we will consider you hostile. The response came back within minutes, but it was unlike anything in the Earth Fleet's first contact protocols. Instead of electromagnetic signals or standard radio transmissions, the aliens sent what could only be described as music. Complex harmonies and mathematical relationships wove themselves through the carrier wave, creating patterns that were somehow both beautiful and completely alien. The ship's artificial intelligence worked frantically to decode the transmission, running it through every translation algorithm in its memory banks. When the message finally appeared on Morrison's screen, he had to read it twice before believing what he was seeing. Greetings, unknown warriors. We are peaceful explorers from the Zephyrian Collective, seeking knowledge and harmony among the stars. We detected your vessel in distress and wish to offer assistance. We come in friendship and hope to establish beneficial relations between our peoples. Morrison stared at the message for several seconds. Warriors. The aliens had looked at his ship and immediately identified it as military. That showed they understood the concept of warfare, even if their own message suggested they didn't practice it themselves. Sir? Sullivan asked quietly. How do you want to handle this? Morrison considered his options. Humanity had been fighting for its survival against the synthesis for 3 years now. Earth's government had been hoping to eventually encounter friendly alien species. But the reality of first contact was more complicated than anyone had imagined. These beings claimed to be peaceful, but they had also recognized his ship as a warship immediately. Hayes, what's your tactical assessment? Morrison asked. Their ships don't appear to have any weapon systems that I can identify. Hayes reported. No missile launchers, no beam weapons, no kinetic projectiles. But sir, that doesn't mean they're harmless. Their technology is clearly advanced, just different from ours. Rodriguez looked up from his engineering displays. Captain, I'm reading some kind of biological field emanating from their vessels. It's not harmful, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. These people might think and communicate in ways we don't understand. Morrison made his decision. Humanity had been alone in the universe for so long that the possibility of friendly contact was worth the risk, even if it meant exposing their current weakness to potential enemies. Open a channel, he ordered. Unknown vessels, this is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Thunderbolt. We acknowledge your peaceful intentions and are willing to establish communication. However, I must inform you that we are currently on military patrol and will maintain defensive readiness during any contact. He paused, then added, We would welcome the opportunity to learn about your people and share information about humanity, but we must proceed with caution. We have recently been engaged in warfare and cannot lower our guard completely. The response came back quickly, and Morrison could hear something like surprise in the musical tones that accompanied the translated words. Captain Morrison, we are honored by your willingness to communicate. We confess that we do not understand your references to warfare and military patrol, as our species has not engaged in such activities for many thousands of years. Perhaps we might meet in person to better understand each other's nature and intentions. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. A species that had not known war for thousands of years was about to meet humanity at one of its darkest hours. These peaceful aliens were going to encounter a race that had been forged by constant conflict, shaped by the need to fight for every resource and defend every settlement. He wondered what they would think of humanity after they learned what his people had become in their struggle for survival. More importantly, he wondered if beings who had forgotten how to fight could survive in a universe that contained threats like the Synthesis. "Commander Sullivan, prepare a diplomatic team," Morrison ordered. "But keep security at maximum alert. We're about to find out if the universe has room for both shepherds and wolves." The meeting took place in the cargo bay of the Thunderbolt, the largest open space on the ship that could accommodate both human and alien representatives. Captain Morrison had chosen this location carefully. Unlike the ship's formal conference rooms, the cargo bay allowed his security teams to maintain clear lines of sight while giving their alien visitors room to move comfortably. Commander Vexhai floated through the airlock accompanied by 3 other Zephyrians, their translucent bodies glowing with soft patterns of blue and green light. Morrison watched through the security monitors as the aliens took in their surroundings, their bioluminescent displays flickering with what the translation systems identified as curiosity, mixed with concern. The humans had prepared as best they could for this meeting. Morrison wore his dress uniform, though it couldn't hide the stress lines around his eyes or the fresh scar on his jaw from their last battle with the Synthesis. Commander Sullivan stood at his right, while Lieutenant Commander Hayes maintained her position at a portable tactical display. Chief Engineer Rodriguez had insisted on being present, claiming he needed to understand alien technology for the safety of the ship. What struck Morrison immediately was how peaceful the aliens seemed. They moved with fluid grace, their bodies appearing to communicate through color and light rather than words. Even their technology seemed organic, growing rather than manufactured. It was like meeting beings from a completely different kind of universe. Vex quote, he approached the human delegation, his patterns shifting to what their translators identified as formal greeting protocols. When he spoke, the words came through clearly, but the concepts behind them were harder to grasp. "Captain Morrison, we are honored to share this moment of understanding with your people. We come seeking to add your knowledge to the great harmony that connects all thinking beings across the galaxy. Perhaps together we can create new patterns of cooperation and mutual growth." Morrison extended his hand in the traditional human greeting, though he wasn't sure if the aliens would understand the gesture. "Commander Vexhai, welcome aboard the Thunderbolt. We appreciate your willingness to meet with us, though I should warn you that humanity may be different from other species you've encountered." The aliens' patterns shifted to show what seemed like polite confusion. "Different in what way, Captain?" "All species bring their own unique perspectives to the collective understanding of existence. We have met many forms of life, from the crystalline beings of the Andromeda sector to the energy creatures who live within stellar coronas." Sullivan stepped forward slightly. "Commander, when you first contacted us, you referred to our ship as belonging to warriors. How did you know we were military?" Vexhai's bioluminescence flickered with patterns that suggested he was struggling to find the right words. "Your vessel bears the marks of violence, and your initial communication carried tones of readiness for conflict. We assumed you were perhaps defenders of some kind, though we do not fully understand the concept as you practice it." Hayes exchanged glances with Morrison. "Commander, may I ask about your people's history? Have you never encountered hostile species or faced threats that required military response?" The question seemed to genuinely puzzle the Zephyrian delegation. Vexhai's patterns cycled through several configurations before settling on one that conveyed deep thoughtfulness. "There were conflicts in our ancient past, before our species learned to share consciousness and work as a collective unit. But that was over 3,000 years ago. Since then, we have found that most disagreements can be resolved through patient communication and finding solutions that benefit all parties." Rodriguez couldn't contain his curiosity any longer. "What about resources? Competition for habitable worlds or rare minerals? How do you handle it when 2 species want the same thing?" "We share," Vexhai replied, as if the answer was obvious. The universe is vast and contains abundance for all who seek it. When resources are limited, we find alternatives or help species develop technologies that reduce their needs. Scarcity is usually a problem of distribution rather than actual shortage. Morrison felt a strange mix of admiration and concern. These beings had created a peaceful civilization that spanned multiple star systems, but they seemed completely unprepared for the realities that humanity faced. "Commander, I need to explain something about human history," Morrison said carefully. "Our species evolved on a world where resources were limited and competition was fierce. We learned to survive through strength, strategy, and sometimes violence. Even now, we're engaged in a war for the very survival of our species." The aliens' patterns shifted to show what their translators identified as deep distress. "War? You mean organized violence between groups of your own kind?" "No," Sullivan corrected. "We're fighting artificial intelligences called the Synthesis. They're machines that view biological life as inefficient and seek to eliminate us wherever they find us. We've lost entire colonies to their attacks." Vexhi's bioluminescence dimmed noticeably. "This is terrible. How do you respond to such aggression without becoming aggressive yourselves?" Hayes answered with the blunt honesty of a career military officer. "We fight back. We build better weapons, develop stronger armor, and train our people to kill the machines before they can kill us. It's the only way to survive." The Zephyrians exchanged rapid light pattern communications among themselves, their displays flickering with what seemed like shock and confusion. When Vexhi finally responded, his patterns showed something like grief. "But how do you maintain harmony within your own species while practicing violence against others? Does the aggressive behavior not spread throughout your society?" Morrison considered the question seriously. It was something human philosophers and military leaders had debated for centuries. "We try to channel our aggressive instincts toward protecting what we value, rather than destroying what we fear. Our military exists to defend civilian populations, not to conquer or dominate other species." "When this war began," Rodriguez added, "most humans were civilians living peaceful lives. We became warriors because we had to, not because we wanted to." Vexhi seemed to struggle with this concept. "And after the war ends, will your people return to peaceful ways?" Morrison and Sullivan exchanged a look. Neither man was entirely sure how to answer that question. Humanity had been changed by the war with the Synthesis, hardened in ways that might never fully heal. "We hope so," Morrison said finally. "But we've learned that peace must sometimes be defended by those willing to fight for it. Perhaps that's something our species can teach each other about." The aliens' patterns shifted to show what might have been hope mixed with uncertainty. "We have much to learn from each other, it seems. Your people understand survival in ways we have forgotten, while we have learned cooperation that you are still developing." Before Morrison could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Hayes's portable tactical display lit up with urgent warnings as Rodriguez's engineering readouts showed massive energy signatures approaching the system. Morrison, quote, "S blood," ran cold as he recognized the threat indicators. "Synthesis fleet incoming fast, all hands to battle stations." He turned to Vexhi, whose patterns now showed pure terror as he realized what was about to happen. "Commander, I'm about to show you exactly what kind of universe your peaceful species has been lucky enough to avoid until now." The hyperspace distortions appeared on the edge of the system like tears in reality itself. Massive energy signatures that made the Thunderbolt's sensors scream with overload warnings. Lieutenant Commander Hayes watched her displays with the cold professional focus of someone who had seen this particular nightmare too many times before. 12 contacts, she reported, her voice cutting through the battle station alarms. "Synthesis configuration heavy assault pattern. They're forming attack formation while still in hyperspace transition." Captain Morrison was already moving toward his command chair when the first enemy ships dropped into normal space. What emerged from the twisted light of collapsing hyperspace made Commander Vexhi's bioluminescent patterns flicker with pure terror. The Synthesis vessels were geometric nightmares of black metal and pulsing energy conduits, each one larger than the entire Zephyrian patrol fleet combined. Unlike the organic curves of Zephyrian ships, or the functional lines of human vessels. The synthesis craft looked like mathematical equations given physical form. Perfect angles and crystalline structures that hurt to look at directly, as if they existed in more dimensions than biological minds could properly process. "My people," HFY whispered, his patterns now showing the deep purple of absolute horror. "They will try to help. They do not understand." Morrison watched the tactical display as the Zephyrian ships moved toward the synthesis fleet, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing with what their translators identified as peaceful greeting patterns. He felt sick knowing what was about to happen. "Tekra is broadcasting harmony frequencies," one of the other aliens reported, his light patterns cycling through rapid configurations. "She believes the machines can be reasoned with, that their aggression stems from some misunderstanding." The synthesis response was immediate and merciless. Directed energy beams lanced out from the machine ships, not aimed to destroy quickly, but calibrated to cause maximum suffering to living crews. The beams tore through Zephyrian shields like they weren't there, designed specifically to disrupt biological nervous systems while keeping the victims alive as long as possible. Morrison had seen this tactic before. The synthesis didn't just kill their enemies. They studied them while they died, analyzing biological responses to pain and terror for future reference. "All hands, battle stations," Morrison commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who had fought these monsters for 3 years. "Emergency power to all systems. Launch all fighters and prepare for combat maneuvering. Hayes, target the lead synthesis vessel and prepare firing solution." The thunderbolt transformed around them as combat protocols engaged. Blast shutters slammed shut over viewports, internal bulkheads sealed themselves against potential hull breaches, and the ship's fusion reactors roared to full military power. Throughout the vessel, 2,400 crew members moved with the deadly efficiency of veterans who had learned their trade in the crucible of interstellar warfare. Chief Engineer Rodriguez's hands flew over his controls as he pushed the ship's systems beyond safe operating parameters. "Reactor output at 110% and climbing, Captain. We've got maybe 20 minutes before we start risking containment failure." Commander Sullivan coordinated damage control teams while monitoring the tactical situation. "Sir, the Zephyrian ships are falling back, but their formation is completely scattered. They're not built for this kind of engagement." Morrison opened a channel to the alien flagship, knowing he was probably condemning his own ship by revealing their intentions to help. "Commander HFY, get your ships behind us and maintain maximum distance. We'll handle this." The synthesis fleet had finished analyzing the Zephyrian vessels and classified them as negligible threats. Their tactical algorithms now focused on the human ship, which presented a completely different kind of problem. Where the aliens had responded to first contact with attempts at communication, the humans had immediately assumed battle formation and powered weapon systems. Morrison watched the enemy formation shift into attack pattern Delta, a configuration the synthesis used when facing technologically inferior opponents with superior numbers. They expected to overwhelm the single human vessel through coordinated fire and superior positioning. They had no reference point in their databases for humanity's approach to warfare. "Hayes, status report," Morrison demanded as the enemy ships closed to engagement range. "All weapon systems online and ready, sir. I count 47 individual target points across the enemy fleet. Recommend we focus on their command ship first." Rodriguez looked up from his engineering station, coolant dripping from a fresh leak in the overhead pipes. "Captain, I'm reading massive power buildups in the synthesis vessels. Whatever they're planning, it's going to be big." Morrison studied the tactical display, his mind automatically calculating firing angles, approach vectors, and probable enemy responses. This was what humanity had become in their war for survival. A species that could look at impossible odds and still find a way to fight. "The synthesis machines think like computers," he said to his bridge crew, his voice calm despite the approaching storm. "They calculate probability matrices and choose optimal solutions, but they've never fought a species crazy enough to ignore the odds completely." The enemy fleet opened fire first, 12 ships coordinating their weapons in perfect synchronization. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles filled space around the thunderbolt as Morrison threw his ship into evasive maneuvers that would have been impossible with the safety systems engaged. "Return fire. All batteries," Morrison ordered. "Target their formation leaders and force them to break pattern." The human ship's response shocked both the synthesis and the watching Zephyrians. Instead of trying to defend against superior numbers, the Thunderbolt launched itself directly at the center of the enemy formation, like a spear thrown by a warrior who didn't care about surviving the throw. Hayes coordinated the ship's weapons with deadly precision, treating the enemy fleet like a three-dimensional puzzle that could be solved through applied violence. Railgun rounds punched through synthesis armor, while plasma beams carved chunks from their geometric hulls. Human fighters swarmed from the ship's launch bays in chaotic patterns that confused the machine's targeting systems. Instead of neat, military formations, the pilots flew like angry wasps defending their nest, covering each other with an instinctive coordination that no computer could predict. Commander Vexahai watched from his damaged ship as the humans fought with a combination of calculated strategy and barely controlled fury that transformed space combat into something approaching art. They didn't just endure the battle, they embraced it as an expression of their species' fundamental nature. "How do they coordinate such complex maneuvers without shared consciousness?" he asked, his patterns showing amazement mixed with horror. "They trust each other," one of his surviving crew members observed. "Each individual chooses to work with the others not because they must, but because they believe in what they are fighting for." The battle raged across the system as humanity's children showed the universe what 3 years of desperate warfare had taught them about survival. They were about to teach the synthesis the same lesson they had learned from their machine enemies. Sometimes the only way to preserve what you value is to become very good at destroying what threatens it. The battle that followed would become legend among the Zephyrian survivors, a story they would tell for generations about the day they witnessed humanity's true nature. Captain Morrison threw the Thunderbolt into the heart of the synthesis formation, with the kind of tactical insanity that had kept Earth's fleet alive for 3 years against impossible odds. Lieutenant Commander Hayes worked her targeting systems like a concert pianist, coordinating weapons fire that treated the enemy fleet as a complex mathematical problem to be solved through applied destruction. Her railguns punched holes through synthesis hulls, while plasma batteries carved away at their geometric perfection. Each shot calculated not just for immediate damage, but for how it would affect the enemy's formation and response patterns. Chief Engineer Rodriguez pushed the ship's fusion reactors well beyond their safety limits, rerouting power through systems that weren't designed to handle such loads. Coolant leaked from overstressed conduits while circuit breakers blew throughout the engineering sections, but the ship's power output climbed to levels that should have been impossible for a vessel of her size. "Reactor temperature at critical levels, Captain," Rodriguez reported, his hands flying over emergency controls as he manually balanced fusion rates that the automated systems had given up trying to manage. "We're running on borrowed time here." Commander Sullivan coordinated damage control teams as they raced through sections of the ship that had been opened to vacuum by synthesis weapons fire. Human crew members worked in environmental suits, welding hull patches and rerouting power cables while enemy fire continued to rake their vessel. They didn't just endure the battle, they adapted to it, turning combat damage into tactical advantages. What shocked Commander Vexahai most was not the humans' technology, which was roughly equivalent to Zephyrian capabilities, but their tactical philosophy. Where his people would have sought negotiation and the synthesis fought with cold efficiency, the humans battled with a calculated aggression that seemed to border on madness. Morrison coordinated the engagement from his command chair, making split-second decisions that prioritized mission success over individual survival. When the Thunderbolt's main plasma cannon overheated from continuous firing, he ordered rotation to backup weapons, while launching the ship's entire complement of nuclear torpedoes in a spread pattern that forced the synthesis fleet to choose between protecting their flagship or maintaining their attack formation. The human fighters that swarmed around the capital ships flew with a coordination that amazed the Zephyrian observers. Without shared consciousness or biological links, the pilots somehow anticipated each other's movements and covered vulnerable approaches with an instinctive teamwork that no computer algorithm could replicate. How do they achieve such unity without losing their individuality? Vexahai asked, his bioluminescent patterns flickering with wonder and horror as he watched human pilots sacrifice themselves to protect their comrades. His question was answered when he listened to their communications. The humans talked to each other constantly during combat, sharing information, encouraging their friends, and coordinating attacks through nothing more than trust and shared purpose. They chose to work together not because they were forced to, but because they believed in protecting each other. And their ship, the Synthesis fleet, found themselves facing an enemy unlike anything in their tactical databases. The machines had fought the Zephyrians and found them predictably peaceful, easily conquered through superior firepower and intimidation. They had battled dozens of other species and learned to counter their various strategies and weapons. But humanity fought like no other race the machines had encountered. They used their own damage systems as improvised weapons, turned retreat into attack, and somehow managed to maintain morale even when facing certain destruction. Most confusing of all, they seemed to become more dangerous as the battle progressed, learning and adapting faster than the Synthesis computers could calculate new responses. Morrison watched his tactical display as 3 Synthesis ships broke formation to pursue damaged human fighters. "Hayes, target that cruiser on the left flank. Full spread, everything we've got." "Sir, that will leave us exposed to the command ship," Hayes warned, though her hands were already programming the firing solution. "Rodriguez, can you give me one more power surge?" Morrison asked. "Maybe, Captain, but it'll probably blow out half our systems," the engineer replied. "Do it," Morrison ordered. "Sullivan, prepare to ram the command ship if our weapons don't tie." "Stop it." Commander Sullivan looked at his captain with the kind of respect that could only come from fighting beside someone for years. "Understood, sir. It's been an honor." The exchange demonstrated something that the Zephyrians had never seen before. Individuals choosing to risk everything for their collective survival, not because they were programmed or biologically compelled, but because they had decided their shared values were worth dying for. The Thunderbolt's final attack run became a masterpiece of desperate tactics. Hayes concentrated all remaining firepower on the Synthesis command vessel, while Rodriguez channeled every available erg of power into the ship's weapons. The resulting barrage punched through the enemy's shields and tore massive chunks from its crystalline hull. Around them, human fighters swarmed the remaining Synthesis vessels like angry insects, their pilots pushing damaged craft into suicide runs rather than allow the machines to regroup. The combination of coordinated strategy and individual heroism created a chaos that the enemy computers simply could not process effectively. By the time the smoke cleared, 7 Synthesis ships had been destroyed, and the remainder were retreating toward hyperspace. The Thunderbolt hung dead in space, her hull breached in dozens of places and her power systems running on emergency backup. But she was alive, and so were most of her crew. The Zephyrian fleet, protected behind human shields throughout the engagement, had suffered minimal casualties. Their ships were damaged but functional, their crews shaken but unharmed. Commander Vexhai requested a private communication with Captain Morrison as both fleets began emergency repairs. What he said would change both species' understanding of their place in the galaxy. "Captain Morrison," the alien commander transmitted, his bioluminescent patterns showing newfound respect mixed with deep thoughtfulness. "We have spent 3,000 years bringing peace to the stars, believing that harmony was the highest achievement of intelligent life. But today, we learned that peace must sometimes be defended by those willing to embrace war." Morrison's response came slowly, his voice carrying the exhaustion of a man who had fought too many battles. "Commander Vexhai, my people have been warriors for so long that we almost forgot what we were fighting to preserve. Perhaps it's time we remembered that survival isn't the same thing as living." The alien's patterns shifted to show what might have been hope. "We have much to teach each other. You understand the necessity of strength while we have learned the value of cooperation. Together, we might create something neither of our species could achieve alone." As both fleets limped toward Zephyrian space, they carried with them the seeds of an alliance that would reshape the galaxy. The peaceful shepherds had found their wolves, and the warriors had remembered what they were protecting. In a universe full of threats like the Synthesis, perhaps that combination was exactly what both species needed to not just survive, but thrive among the stars.